So as I was reflecting on this series and thinking about what we're going to be discussing today, and we'll be in Acts chapter 2 if you want to be there. If not, it's going to be on the screen, so you're going to be good anyways. But that song just kept playing in my head, and I heard this phrase this week, this statement, and this individual said that, they were talking through the cross, and they said, what a gift to know that the thing that was meant for us was taken so freely by someone who just loved us that deeply. So I just want you to know, if you're sitting here just questioning whether God loves you, he does. That he took your punishment, took my punishment, to a place to create revival. And that's what it's all about. My wife and I, we were kind of processing that whole scope, and we went through a season, and when I say season, it was probably 10 to 15 years for us. Some of you, you're like, I know those seasons. We went through a season of the only thing, and I mean it in the most literal sense I can say it, the only phrasing we could come up with is it felt like hell. It felt like every moment that we just turned, there was just pain and suffering and struggle. Like I don't know if you've been through those seasons before, whether it's just a few months, a few years. Maybe it was 10 to 15 years like we experienced. And it really got me thinking through where we are now, not just as individuals, but Jesus followers, and where God's taken me as a leader. Because a lot of times, I'll be honest, sometimes I don't feel equipped as a leader. And God just continuously reminds me, I'm really not, but he is. And he equips the called. He doesn't call the equipped, right? And so as we're thinking through revival and thinking through this series, I want to kind of give you a synopsis. If you haven't been around, or you haven't heard this series, or you missed a week or two, this is how it plays out. Easter was week 1, and we talked through if the resurrection didn't happen, then revival doesn't matter. And we know through facts, we know through scripture, we know through history, and now even today, there's things that have been unraveled to know that the resurrection is true. And even though people don't want to acknowledge it, they're like, oh, something happened that might have been a biblical thing. I'm like, or the Bible, And that moment changed everything for everyone, but specifically for the disciples, because for them, it went from religion to relationship, where they, for the first time, experienced what it looked like to have a God that loved them so freely and truly, that it wasn't about checking off boxes or measuring up to a moment. It was about loving him and giving their lives to him and allowing him just to figure out the rest, right? And so you look at Peter and his moment where he denies Jesus as a follower of Jesus, spent 3 years with him, then denies him, but then is restored and then starts the church. He understands the hurt that people experience because he experienced the same hurt. And so the whole focus on that was, you help revive other people through your revival. And then when the church comes together as a revival moment, then it has the ability to change the community, and that's what we're talking about today. And so for you, I think for us, for you, maybe you live your life like this, like your life feels a little bit more automatic. I don't know if you're like this, maybe your bills are on, auto pay because you're like, I'm going to forget to pay them anyways. So it's one of the worst things. I don't know if you feel like this. You get your paycheck and then you just start seeing all the automated things. You're like, well, I did have money. Maybe that's your life. And you're like, I live by a schedule. My wife keeps a paper calendar on our fridge, which I pay no attention to. I see it every day, and I pay no attention to it. And she's like, it was on the calendar. I'm like, yeah, I didn't see it. But I live through a calendar on my phone. I don't know if you are like that, but everything it goes through my phone. If it doesn't make it to my phone, I don't see it. But my life kind of stays automatic in that way. I love the fact that automatically I can have any great past TV show like The Office, or I can have any current TV show because we have all the streaming. Any movie, your life just becomes so automatic. You just kind of let it happen, right? But here's the hardship. I think the church can become automatic. I think your relationship with Jesus can become automatic. And then, when disruption happens or pain happens, you have to start working through that moment. And there's two kinds of different pains. I've got a 15-year-old that I'm teaching how to drive, which I actually enjoy. Some of you are like, that is a terrible experience, but I actually enjoy it until this past week. And, we've been practicing parking, and we're getting wide open parking spots that no one else is in because she takes the imaginary cars out as she whips it around because she's trying to figure out perspective, right? And so the other day I was like, let's just go home. And she's like, okay. She starts to get out. I'm like, no, you're taking us home. Now, this is a 3-lane road, and the middle lane is a continuous turn lane, so there's really no significant danger, really. until she's just really bad and just yanks it, right? And she does what all of us do. You probably remember this, right? The first time you drive on a real road, you start to hug that right line, especially when a car's coming the other way. You're like, ugh, Except on this road, it's just straight curb. And I drive a Honda Civic, which is like that far off the ground. And so she's starting to edge closer and closer. And I'm like, left. She's like, okay. And she's not lefting at all. She's just continuing. I'm like, left. And she's like my wife, where she literally, my wife has to do this. And if you're one of these, I'm not making fun of you, but it is funny. She goes, okay, that's left. And so she's like, I'm like, don't take your hands off. She's like, okay. So she's like, left. And I'm telling you, we were within inches. I'm like, left! I'm screaming at her at this point. And then automatic, she just yanks in. She's like, we almost crashed. I'm like, you almost crashed us on the other side, right? There is that kind of pain, which is kind of fun and it's not real. Or like the workout pain, you're like, I know it's working because I feel so bad. That's good pain. But then there's life pain that feels not so automatic, right? Like moments happen in your life. I remember this vividly. It's been almost 20 years. We're like just over 19, almost 20 years when my dad was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And like life stopped being automatic. And I remember every moment, but in the moment, it was like nothing else seemed to just seem to happen. Like you're just so focused on this that nothing else is automatic, right? And I heard this quote. I love it. Go ahead and hit it for me. You only understand the power of one more day when you are threatened with never having another one. I want that to sink in for a minute. You only understand the power of one more day when you're threatened with never ever having another one. And that was the moment for us to go, okay, this isn't automatic anymore. Like this is real pain that is doing something, and you're hoping that it's developing, but right now it just hurts, right? And you're just sifting through it going, what do I do with this pain? And that's really what I want you to kind of, shift through with me. It's this. When that shift happens with you and God, it doesn't just change how you think about your time. It changes how you think about people around you as well. Because it's not about automatic anymore. It's about getting out of your own way and just living for your why. That's what we talked about last week, is like once you have your why and Jesus gives you that why, your life starts to look different. And when you get out of the automatic zone, and that's with life or with your relationship with Jesus, life just looks different. Like I want you to think through that for just a second. Like how many things are just routine in your life? You do it because it's what you do. It's Monday, I wake up and I do this. It's Tuesday, I wake up and I do this. You're not doing it because you want to really take everything out of your life. You're doing it because it's just automatic. But, when that pain, that suffering, that moment happens, you have to start thinking about it for a minute. And things start to get real, for lack of a better phrase, right? But most of us, like we're never really taught how to interpret pain. We're just taught how to react to it. This was my life. This was our family. We just reacted to it. We're just in survival mode for so long. We just react to pain. And maybe, like, I've experienced it this year, absolutely, but as we were reflecting over the last 10 to 15 years, I'm like, I still struggle with this, but I don't know if we would have been capable of being in this position to lead. Again, we're not, God is, but the pain that we went through, and we've just been reflecting all of this, it's like, this is for this. What if, like, the things that you've been experiencing in your life, the moments that feel like struggles or suffering or pain or whatever, what if they were meant for something? And what if God was just positioning moments for you to not just react, but to really interpret that pain and grow through that pain and learn through that pain? And what if, like James, like we talked about, like consider it pure joy? It's hard. Because you want to. But a lot of times you're just sitting there, you feel like God's just sitting there like an angry parent just yelling at you, right? But maybe he's just using moments to not only stretch you, but stretch your influence and stretch the community around you, and in relationships, stretch the church. So in psychology, this is how it breaks down. Pain equals the actual discomfort, right? And the suffering is the meaning and the resistance we attach to it. A lot of times we look at suffering, I hear this in the church all the time, I'm just suffering right now. Maybe you are, but maybe God is allowing some discomfort to radically shift not only some things in your life, but things around you as well. And a lot of times, we call it suffering, but really what it is God using things to move in our lives. And sometimes we're in a broken world, sometimes it is suffering. Why do bad things happen to good people? Bad things happen to everyone. Because we're in a bad place. We're in a broken world. But God also uses bad things to do radical transformation, not only in your life, but the others around you. So, there's this... There's pain that destroys you, and there's pain that's developing you, and this is what we're going to talk through today. This is Peter. Peter had a huge shift in pain, and then he used that pain to relate to other people and then create the church. We're going to talk through that here in just a little bit. But if you don't know the difference, you'll run from both. And this is what I'm going to tell you. I lived a lot of that 10 to 15 years just running from pain, just crying out to God, say, can you just stop this? And it just kept happening. I'm like, why? Because I didn't learn from what God was doing in my life. So if you're sitting in that moment going, why are these things happening? I'm just telling you, there are shifts that need to happen for the church to be the church. And we're going to break down what the church was supposed to be and what it's become now today. But I'm just telling you, like, what God was setting up from the very beginning, he wants to continue to do in your life. And you may be close enough to God, just close enough to God, hit the next one for me, to feel like you're moving. Like, we love this in the American church today. Like, I'll come into the four walls of the church and I'll sing the songs, and I won't lift my hands fully up because that feels vulnerable, but I'll do it right here because this is close enough, and I'm not making fun of anyone. I don't want you to hear that. But like, we do enough to feel like God's moving, but I'm telling you, myself, a lot of us, we never get close enough to actually allow God to shift things in your life. Because if we lose control, that feels too vulnerable. But maybe God needs to shift things because the things that have been going on, the pain that you've been experiencing, the movement that's been happening, is going to land to something even bigger. So, through the church, this is what you need to see, that the church keeps avoiding the formation, but the community outside never feels it either. Like, when we stop moving with God, the community never feels it around them. And I was saying this, I'm not trying to call out any church in particular. I think this is the American church. We've gotten very comfortable in our four walls. We've gotten very comfortable in just sitting in here and sticking in our lanes, and it's like, we'll do our Jesus thing, and if you want to, you can come in. It's like, but that's not what the church was designed for. And when God was creating a revival moment, he wasn't just saying it to create a little bit of a formation. He was doing it to create a community of change. And that's what we're going to break down today. If you guys have your Bible, we're going to be in Acts chapter 2. Let me give you a breakdown. We're going to move to that here in just a second. But last week, if you weren't here or if you don't remember, Peter established the church. And they had seen Peter multiple times. This was an area, like, the disciples didn't really move out of the vicinity that they traveled. They preached in the same general area. They grew up in this area. People knew who they were. It's kind of like Mayberry type of feel, right? Like, everyone knows everything about everyone. It's like they remembered that one thing you did when you were 5 and you're still that kid when you were 5. That's Peter, right? And so he never really grew out of that. So when they see Peter come back on the scene, they're like, holy cow, this guy's different. And they look at him and they're like, are you drunk? He's like, no, it's only 9 o'clock in the morning. I'm not drunk, right? But he's sitting there and he's going, hey, what's changed is Jesus Christ within me. And if you want that same radical change, you just have to accept him. 3,000 people, men were the only ones counted back then. 3,000 men, were baptized, probably 10 to 15,000 people in total baptized. Radical shift, radical transformation, and then the church was born. This is what happens as the church is established. This is going to be Acts chapter 2, verse 42. It says this: all the believers devoted themselves to the apostles' teachings and to the fellowship and to the sharing in meals, including the Lord's Supper, and to prayer. This is essentially a worship service, right? This is kind of what we do. We sing songs. We do teaching. There's a gathering together. Most of us love this part, sharing in meals. We're like, yes, give us all the food, right? And then there's prayer time. So this is essentially the church, and they're meeting in everyone's home. So this is the moment where they're like, okay, we got baptized, what? And they're like, let's create the church. So they do this. And here's the thing, like, we're going to talk about this in a second. A shift starts to happen, and you go, why doesn't that happen today? I want you to see fellowship, sharing meals, prayer. Hold on to that. All right, verse 43. A deep sense of awe came over all of them, and the apostles performed many miraculous signs and wonders. They start healing people. They start delivering people out of, just cycles of sin. You're like, why aren't these things happening in the church? Because we stopped doing the essential things that got the church there. Like, how often do you pray when you're not just dependent on it as a lifeline? How often do you pray in such a way that you're just in awe of what God is doing in your life when it's not just when you're falling asleep and you got 5 quick minutes? How often do you legitimately dive into the Bible? Not like, oh, I got to get ready for, church on Sunday, but like you're just studying and getting deep in God's word. How often do we get expectant for God to show up in ways and then lean into that? This is why those things don't happen today. Verse 44. And all the believers met together in one place and shared everything they had. A lot of people will point to this and say, this is socialism. It's not. Socialism is for the government, like it's everyone coming together and giving everything to the government, and the government keeping a stranglehold, keeping the rich rich and the poor poor. This is completely different. You're going to see the difference. Verse 45. They sold their property and possessions. Could you imagine if this happened today? Some of you are like, whoo! And shared the money with those in need. You're like, uh-oh. Feeling pressure, right? This is not a giving message. Don't hear that. But I'm just kidding. But they sold their property. Back then, this was their retirement plan. Like this was things that they would hand down, to their sons and daughters. And this is what they would use for their retirement to be taken care of. So when they're looking at it, and this is why socialism is not this. Their reliance was no longer on their things. It was on Jesus. When our reliance is on anything else, it becomes not the church. And then 46. They worshiped together at the temple each day. Some of you are like, I can barely make it to church, one day a month. I get it. Every day they worshiped together, met in homes for the Lord's Supper, and shared their meals with great joy. And what? Generosity. Why? Because it wasn't on them anymore. They became the church. They became a place where it wasn't about their stuff, it wasn't about their reliance on this world, it was their reliance on Jesus. And they got so incredibly joyful about the change that's happening in their lives that they became incredibly generous. And then 47 says this. And all the while praising God and enjoying the goodwill of all the people. And each day, this is the big piece, each day the Lord added to their fellowship those who were being saved. Why? Because everyone, no matter who they were, what they believed, who they used to be, could be a part of this. This was an upheaval of the system. This wasn't just an establishment of the church. This was an upheaval of the establishment that had been made. See, the Romans were really good at a lot of things. You know what they were also really good at? Not only like killing people, like, the cross. They were really good at creating a system that people were relying on the government. That they could hold you captive with a system that you were reliant on. So when the church comes and starts disrupting, that's when craziness happens. See, this wasn't just a spiritual glow. Like, you look at this and you're like, oh, that's nice and neat. It wasn't that. It was a different reality forming right inside the old one. This was an upheaval and a throw right into the face of what the government had established. This was something new. And so when you look at this, you're like, man, why does the church not feel like this? Because we stopped doing the things that made the church the church. We got reliant on a Sunday morning program for that 1 hour to get my Jesus time. And then we just do our normal automatic life the rest of the week. We stopped praying like it depended on God and stopped doing things like it depended on us. Like they didn't wait for God to bring the perfect person. They started doing it, right? We've stopped diving into the scriptures and understanding what this is and how it relates to my life. This is why it doesn't feel the same is because this was a different reality. See, the church, what we've done is we've started just pulling the church right into culture. And this wasn't what it was. In fact, a couple years later, this is what the church becomes. It becomes so radically different. This is chapter 4. This is just 2 years later. All the believers, how many? All, right? Were united in one heart and one mind. Holy cow, you mean they didn't fight over the carpet? Right? Like, they didn't go like, I don't like their house. They got a dog. I need to go to someone else's house. Right? Like, they didn't go like, we just get goldfish for, I know the kids don't care about that. But, like, one heart and one mind, one focus. They stopped, but they never started. They never had this inward fight. Why do we have so many denominations? Because people can't agree on anything. It's like they had one heart and one mind. And they felt like what they had owned was not their own. They realized this was not on them anymore. And this world was not the goal. So they shared everything they had. Verses 34 through 35 says this: they were no needy people among them. I worked for the Department of Children and Family for about 6 months. That's how long I lasted. Department of Children and Family in Florida is like DFACS here. And so my job was to rip kids out of homes. And it's what you can do with a bachelor's in counseling. It's really only thing you can do with the bachelor's in counseling. It was not a good career choice. But 6 months I lasted in that because what I realized was this. That was a system not trying to help people get out of a system. It was a system designed to keep people in a system. You would rip kids out of homes, and parents had to jump through many hoops to get their kids back that they just stopped. And then these kids realized that they just had to do the system the right way, and they could get through the system and not get scathed too hard. You know what happens when they graduate out of the system? They become a new part of the system. It's just this cycle that continues to perpetuate. And hear me when I say this. It was trying to help people, but what it did is it helped keep people captive. And this was a system that was letting people free. See, they were no needy people among them, because those who had owned land or houses would sell them and bring the money to the apostles to give to those in need. You know what this is? A radical heart shift where there's there's a little pain in not having these possessions, but that little bit of pain, I'm realizing that God is doing something in it in such a way that people around me are experiencing Jesus. And they would look at this and go, man, what if the joy that I have just spreads throughout everything? See, they hadn't just broken bad habits. They had let the entirety, an entirely different root system take over how they think, how they spend, how they decide, and how they belong. And I'm just as guilty as this, but when something happens, what do you start processing through? Right? You're like, do we have the money for this? Do we have the time for this? How much is this going to disrupt? Our youngest was pruning, roses yesterday, and with these garden shears, and they slipped, and literally I still have no idea. I was out at Home Depot. Garden shears went straight down into her foot. And you know what I was thinking? First off, I was like, is she okay? And then I was like, holy cow, how much time is this going to cost me? 2 hours, by the way, for them to glue it shut. And, you're like, what's the copay? You start thinking about all these different things. And when disruption happens, this is what we go to. But this wasn't what was happening in the church. It was a whole different system. When disruption happened, they just took care of it. When people were in need, they just took care of it. When people didn't know who Jesus was, they helped them belong. When the people were just experiencing hardship, they came around them. This was a disruption in the establishment. And that was the struggle. Because what you're going to see here in just a second, 20 years later, as the church has just taken over everything, people are getting upset because the control that they had on society is starting to deteriorate to the church. So this is what they do. 20 years later in Thessalonica, but some of the Jews were jealous. So they gathered some troublemakers from the marketplace to form a mob. We've never seen that, have we? Paid protesters or anything. We've never seen any of this. And that is not political, by the way. This is not a right or a left thing. This is just an observation. That would never happen. They're searching for Paul and Silas so that they could drag them out to the crowd. What they were seeing was, hey, our control on things are deteriorating because people don't need the government because they're just being the church. Let's stop the source. Verse 6, it says this. Paul and Silas have caused trouble all over the world, they shouted, and now they are here disturbing our city too. This whole church thing is just taking over. It's too much. When was the last time the church was called a disturbance like this? There's too much joy. There's too much people taking care of things for other people. There's too much, there's not enough poor people around because the church just keeps taking care of it. I'm angry. There's not any homeless people. We're angry. We're upset. No, like, this is because of the church not being the church that we're having to rely on broken systems. This is what the church was supposed to be, and this is what revival did to the church. See, they weren't accusing Paul and Silas of giving people quiet personal breakthroughs. Like, this would be great. This is the like, hey, we had 2 people saved today, and you're like, oh, that's awesome. Keep it in your 4 walls. They were accusing them of disturbing the system, specifically their city, but the system. When was the last time the church was accused of disturbing the system in this way? And I say that not to make anyone feel bad, but like, this is revival. This is what the church was supposed to be. And we've just settled into just being a part of culture. See, revival doesn't ask if you're busy, if you have the time, if you have the finances, if you're ready. It asks if you're available. And you know what the issue is? We're so worried about our own comfort that many times we just miss the fact that God really isn't asking if you're available. He's pushing on you until you realize that you are and you need to be. Like 10 to 15 years was the buildup for us to be here. And all those disruptions and all those struggles and all those moments that I'm like, God, can you just be done with this? It's because he was changing my heart to be ready to lead other people to change theirs. But your disruptions and your disturbances, like, he just needs your heart to be available for that. And furthermore, like, this is what I would ask myself. This is what I have asked myself. Like, would my neighbor see revival in me? I've got 2 neighbors, one on both sides. We have no one on our back end because that's commercial property. We've talked about that with the trees and stuff, right? The one to our, depending on what you're looking at, right or left, but he's a deacon in another church, and we talk church stuff all the time. He likes to be like, oh yeah, that's what our church is dealing with, our problems, and he likes to church swap stories. Our church is awesome. We don't have any problems at all. And we have a great church. Most of the problems are just me. I'm just going to be honest. And but like, I know him really well. We have a great relationship. We talk church. My other neighbor, I don't even know if they know that we're Christians, let alone a pastor. But it goes even further than this. Does your neighbor know? Does the person that cut you off in traffic that you just told them they're number 1, do they know that you're a Jesus follower? Like, do the people in front of you in the grocery store, can they experience revival in your heart? But like, as a church, and not just house and church, but the church, like, would my neighbor see revival in the church? And again, please don't hear this as like a call out, but like, do they just see the church people as bigots that just want to stay contained in their 4 walls and be okay with a social club? Or do they see the church as a place where true revival can happen, where people's lives can be transformed and changed? That's really what it comes down to. And I want you to hear this, is like, if the church really does what it's supposed to do, and not just house and church, but if the church does what it's supposed to, you know what happens? Homelessness goes away. There's no need for foster care systems. There's really no needy, no poor people. And those physical needs are met, but you know what else happens? Is like, people's lives are changed forever. Because for the first time, they experience a place that truly is for them and wants something for them. and they start to experience that same revival. It's okay, I guess, if we want to just sit in chairs and feel spiritual. To experience true revival, that means something different. And just like causing a disruption in the city, it's going to cause a disruption in your life. And the question you've got to ask is, are you ready for that? Are you ready for people to see disruption in your life and see revival in your life? Because the city around you, I want you to know this. Perry, Warner Robins, Bonaire, Macon, Kathleen, Fort Valley. I'm going to run out of names here, but like the city around you is writing its verdict on the church already. So I would ask, what story are they telling about the church? And do they see revival, or do they see a bunch of people that just gather because that's what they're supposed to do? And will you keep treating tomorrow like it's guaranteed? Or will you let God build the kind of life in you and in us as a church that only makes sense if Jesus really did raise from the dead? Because I'm telling you, like, I'm just as guilty of this, but I think we come into the church, we come into life a lot of times like, we're like, oh, cool, Jesus died. Jesus died for us so that we could live a life renewed and transformed and revived. Like, he took what we should have had. He took what was already planned for us. And we treat it like it's just automatic, like it's just routine. But what if we truly live like this? Because, honestly, a shared life so rooted in the resurrection that the world around you has to come up with language for what they're seeing, that's what we should be aiming for. They looked at the church and they're like, this is a revolution that has to stop. That was the church. It was so against what they had put together that they could not stand to let it happen because it was disrupting everything that they put on. And I think people are just happy with where the church is because it's just not disrupting much of anything. So a revived church, this is what a revived church does. It revives a community. If it's truly a revived church. But more importantly, not only does a revived church revive a community, it revives those around you, and they're already watching to find out if that's still true. So your friends, your neighbors, your people that you're in line with, the people that you're shopping with, the people that are on the baseball teams with your kids, they're already watching. And more than likely, the church is already doing what people expect it to do. But what if a church acted so radically different that it truly was the church? You know what would happen? A community would change. And that's the kind of church I want to be a part of. So that's the challenge. What does a revived church look like? Generous in every aspect. Service in every aspect. Giving of their time, their abilities. That moments that feel disruptive become joyful. Church that pours out of their heart so actively of who God is that you don't have to tell them that you're a Jesus follower, they see it. The people aren't left alone, that they belong immediately. It doesn't matter if they look like us, feel like us. I saw this video of this girl crying. Millennials, I don't know if you know this, millennials and Gen Z are the fastest demographic coming back to the church. They are coming at a 60 to 70% rate. Here's the problem. A lot of them aren't sticking out in the church. I said this girl was crying. She was covered in tattoos, and I know she'd be very comfortable in a church like ours, but a lot of churches, not so much. She's crying, and she's talking in the video, and she goes, I'm going to keep trying, but why are church people so angry and so mean? And I'm just saying, what if we became the most generous, selfless, service-minded people that they look at us and they go, man, that's just a disruption. Wouldn't that be a thing? Be the church. I'd love to pray for you. God, I just pray that as we start to really become who you've called us to be, God, church revived, not just merely in words, but in action. God, that we give so selflessly and so relentlessly, God, that it's not about us. God, and maybe we're not to a place where that we're willing to step out on faith, but God, I pray that you disrupt our lives in such a way that you get us there. God, that it looks so radically different that so many people that would feel pushed out by the church could find a home even here, God. And not just in Houston Church, God. I pray that revival happens in the church, in your church. God, that we just give so much to who you are that we just don't hold back. And God, I pray the things that we just hold so deeply that we just let go if it just means people find you. God, that we don't hold on to the things that we have, the comfortability, God, that we just give in such a place that you just get all the recognition from it. God, we just love you so much. Thank you for enduring the cross so we didn't have to. God, thank you for changing our hearts to look more like you. And God, for the moments that we fail, thank you for loving us in spite of it. God, that you love us exactly where we're at. You just love us way too much to leave us there. It's in your name that we pray. Amen.